Stalin's death wasn't just the end of a dictator. It was democracy's first glimpse into authoritarianism's fatal weakness: succession. On March 5, 1953, as the Korean War raged, the Soviet Union faced a crisis no democratic nation ever experiences. How does a dictatorship transfer absolute power when its absolute ruler dies? This moment revealed the fundamental instability of authoritarian systems. While democratic nations transfer power through elections, constitutions, and established procedures, dictatorships collapse into paranoid power struggles when their strongman vanishes. Stalin's death exposed what democratic leaders already knew: systems built on one man's will cannot survive that man's mortality. Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, and other democratic leaders watched Soviet chaos with grim satisfaction, understanding what authoritarian apologists never grasp. Free societies endure because power belongs to institutions, not individuals. Stalin's death proved that when democracies face leadership transitions, they grow stronger. But when dictatorships lose their dictator, they reveal the hollowness at their core. For 29 years, Stalin ruled through absolute terror, eliminating any potential successor who might threaten his authority. This fundamental contradiction doomed Soviet succession from the start. Authoritarian systems require strong leaders, but cannot tolerate anyone strong enough to lead. Democratic nations solve succession through predictable processes. American presidents serve limited terms. British prime ministers face regular votes of confidence, and French leaders operate within constitutional frameworks. Citizens know exactly how power transfers, when it transfers, and who can legitimately claim authority. Stalin created the opposite system: a government so dependent on his personal authority that his death left a power vacuum no institution could fill. When Stalin suffered his stroke on March 1, 1953, his inner circle faced an impossible choice: call doctors who might save him but learn state secrets, or let him die to protect those secrets. They chose secrecy over salvation, a decision that perfectly captured authoritarianism's paranoid priorities. For 12 hours, the Soviet Union effectively had no government, while party officials debated whether their dying leader could be trusted with medical care. Democratic nations never face such absurd dilemmas because power resides in offices, not individuals. Stalin's death triggered exactly the kind of succession crisis that democratic institutions prevent. Within hours of his passing, former allies became deadly rivals in a power struggle that would reshape world communism. Lavrenti Beria, Stalin's secret police chief, immediately moved to consolidate control over security forces. Georgy Malenkov claimed the party leadership, while Nikita Khrushchev maneuvered for position. Each potential successor commanded personal loyalties, not institutional authority, precisely the situation democratic systems avoid through constitutional succession. Compare this chaos to democratic transitions occurring simultaneously. In January 1953, Dwight Eisenhower peacefully assumed the American presidency from Harry Truman through established electoral processes. Despite profound policy disagreements, the transition proceeded smoothly because both men respected democratic institutions larger than themselves. The Soviet power struggle revealed authoritarianism's deeper weakness. Systems built on fear cannot inspire genuine loyalty. Beria commanded the secret police through terror. Malenkov controlled the party through patronage. and Khrushchev appealed to ideological true believers, but none possessed the moral authority that democratic leaders derive from popular consent. Within months, Beria was arrested and executed. Malenkov was demoted, and Khrushchev emerged victorious, not through democratic selection, but through the same backstabbing and elimination that Stalin had used to gain power. While Soviet leaders fought for Stalin's throne, ordinary citizens paid the price for authoritarian instability. The succession struggle paralyzed government decision-making, delayed economic reforms, and perpetuated the climate of fear that Stalin had created. Democratic transitions impose no such costs on citizens. When American presidents change, government services continue, economic policies remain stable, and social programs function normally. Constitutional continuity protects ordinary people from the disruption that accompanies authoritarian power struggles. The Soviet succession demonstrated how dictatorships sacrifice popular welfare for elite competition. Millions of Gulag prisoners remained enslaved, while potential successors debated whether releasing them would appear weak. Agricultural reforms that might have prevented famines were postponed while leaders consolidated power. Stalin's death also revealed the moral bankruptcy of authoritarian hero worship. For decades, Soviet propaganda had portrayed Stalin as an infallible genius. His death instantly exposed this lie. If Stalin was truly indispensable, how could the Soviet Union survive without him? Democratic leaders never claim infallibility, because democratic systems assume human fallibility. Democratic institutions provide mechanisms for correcting errors without regime collapse. Stalin's death highlighted another crucial difference: economic continuity during leadership transitions. Democratic market economies continue functioning regardless of political changes, while command economies depend entirely on central authority. When Eisenhower replaced Truman, American businesses continued operating, stock markets remained stable, and economic growth proceeded normally. Democratic institutions separate economic activity from political leadership, protecting prosperity from governmental instability. The Soviet Union faced the opposite situation. Stalin's death left economic planners uncertain about policy direction, factory managers afraid to make decisions, and agricultural collectives paralyzed by bureaucratic confusion. Command economies cannot function without commanding authority. This economic paralysis had immediate human consequences. Food distribution slowed, industrial production declined, and consumer goods became even scarcer. While Soviet leaders fought for power, ordinary citizens experienced the economic cost of authoritarian succession. Stalin's death created international instability that democratic transitions never produce. Allied nations couldn't predict Soviet policy direction. Diplomatic initiatives stalled, and the Korean War armistice negotiations nearly collapsed as potential successors positioned themselves. Democratic transitions provide international predictability. When new democratic leaders assume office, foreign governments understand constitutional constraints, established alliances, and treaty obligations that limit policy changes. Authoritarian successions create opposite effects. Stalin's potential successors had no constitutional limitations, no parliamentary oversight, and no public accountability. Each could theoretically reverse any Soviet policy, abandon any commitment, or launch any aggressive action to consolidate domestic support. Today's authoritarian leaders study Stalin's succession crisis, learning both its lessons and its warnings. Putin's Russia, Xi's China, and other dictatorships all face the same succession dilemma: how to transfer absolute power without destroying the system that created it. Putin has spent decades eliminating potential successors while avoiding constitutional limitations, but this strategy recreates Stalin's dilemma. Systems built around one leader cannot survive that leader's departure. When Putin eventually dies or falls, Russia will likely experience similar succession chaos. Xi Jinping abolished China's presidential term limits precisely to avoid succession uncertainty. But this decision only postpones the inevitable crisis while making it potentially more severe. The lesson remains vital. Authoritarian systems appear strong because they concentrate power. But this concentration creates fatal weakness when leaders inevitably exit. Democratic systems appear messy because they distribute power. But this distribution creates resilience that outlasts any individual politician. Stalin's death proved that democracy's greatest strength lies not in the leaders it produces, but in the institutions that survive them. The Soviet succession crisis demonstrated authoritarianism's fatal flaw. Systems built on personal rule cannot outlast the persons who rule them. Democratic nations learned a crucial lesson from Stalin's demise. Constitutional government isn't just about protecting individual rights. It's about creating institutional stability that transcends individual mortality. When democratic leaders leave office, democracy continues. When dictators die, dictatorship faces existential crises. As we confront modern authoritarian threats, Stalin's death reminds us why defending democratic institutions matters more than supporting any particular leader. The dictator died, but democracy endured, proving that freedom, once institutionalized, becomes immortal, while tyranny remains forever mortal.